weekly rushes. It's that time of the week when I have to imbibe some fabulous coffee and then speedily rush through the weekly rushes. So just bear with me. Oh, and by the way, the sound in the background is people grilling in the street. Yummity yum yum, yummity yummity yum yum yum. First story is a Wes Anderson story. Wes Anderson isn't necessarily everyone's cup of tea. You either love him or you loathe him, or like me, you kind of are all right about him and you have a few films of his that you particularly like. My favourite film of his is The Fantastic Mr. Fox, which is a kind of coincidence because the new news story is a new Roald Dahl story that Wes Anderson is bringing to the big screen. He's managed to snag Benedict Cumberbatch, Ralph Fiennes, Dev Patel and Ben Kingsley in a new film which is called The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. And it's the story of Henry Sugar, who's a man who steals a book which shows him how to see through objects and predict the future. Curious, odd. It's going to be a live action film. So I think Benedict Cumberbatch is playing the titular Henry Sugar. This is all part of the Netflix deal. They bought up the Roald Dahl estate, library, IP, whatever you want to call it. It's a little bit like Disney's grab of Lucasfilms. Netflix bought up all the Dahl back catalogue for $500 million. I kid you not, it's a lot. So we're going to be getting a lot of Roald Dahl content coming our way. But I think this is a good get, and it's a good fit having Wes Anderson working on this, obviously after the success, as I say, of my favourite film of his, which is The Fantastic Mr. Fox. What's your favourite, I want to know, what's your favourite Wes Anderson film? Lil Rel Howery, great comic actor. I first came across him in Jordan Peele's Get Out. He was also in the recent Ryan Reynolds film, Free Guy. He's joining Zachary Levi, the actor who played Shazam, and they're starring. Now this is amazing. I remember as a boy, do any of you remember as a boy, there was a book, it was written in 1955. It's called Harold and the Purple Crayon. There were quite a few books, I think, written done after the first one. And it's about a boy who walks around with a crayon and he creates the worlds in which he lives. I took this so literally that I remember walking down the hallway in our flat as a kid with a pen, drawing the world. And it was such a magical concept that you could draw the world into which you could enter. I loved it. So this has been turned into a film. How they're going to do it, whether it's an animation with them voicing, I'm not entirely sure. It's a curious book to kind of want to adapt for the big screen, but boy, is it a nostalgic book. Sundance Film Festival is getting going soon. It's going to be a virtual affair. I think Omicron is, or Omicrumpet as we call it in this house, Omicron is playing havoc with scheduling and in-person visits to film festivals. And obviously documentaries are shown at film festivals. One of the documentaries that's really standing out above and beyond the others is a documentary about Evan Rachel Wood, who's the actress, the lead actress from Westworld is where I know her best. That's where I first came across her. But she was featuring in a documentary that's being made by Amy Berg, who's been Oscar nominated, director. She did Deliver Us from Evil and Open Secret. But this was going to be a documentary about domestic violence, survivors of, the treatment of women and what have you. And it was going to feature Evan Rachel Wood. And then in the making of it, Evan Rachel Wood decided to reveal that her abuser was actually Marilyn Manson. And I'll quote the director here. The director said, "This wasn't about Marilyn Manson and his whole world. This was about an Erin Brockovich story. We were really focused on telling a story about empowerment, about Evan Rachel Wood, something that would offer resources for women and men who are stuck in abusive situations. That was what we were making until she decided to name him publicly." Now, obviously, the Marilyn Manson case is still ongoing. He's been charged. Evan Rachel Wood went very public about this case, and this is going to be an unflinching documentary. I think it's going to be an absolute must-watch that will do precisely all the things that I think Amy Berg, the director, wanted it to do. But it's going to have that added sort of drama and sort of shock value, if you like, of a major Hollywood star naming and shaming essentially another Hollywood star. Next up is another casting story. Pete Davidson, Saturday Night Live, recently had a cameo in The Suicide Squad. King of Staten Island was a brilliant film, essentially a very autobiographical film about him, his waster life, if you like, not that he's got a waster life now, and based on, you know, the character in it, also his father also died in 9/11, which is the true story of Pete Davidson's father. Pete Davidson, he's obviously rather infamously dating Kim Kardashian, or they would have us think that they're dating, and Pete Davidson is starring, or has been cast to star in a new film horror film by the creators of the Purge franchise, which is an incredibly successful franchise. If you've not seen The Purge, again, if you are easily triggered or easily scared, it might not be for you. But anyway, he's going to be in a new horror film called The Home. And the reason I've pulled this story is there's nothing more than actually Pete Davidson's in it, but the concept I think is a really neat one. He plays a character called Max, who's a troubled man who starts working in a retirement home. But whilst working in the retirement home, he realises that the residents and the caretakers have sort of somewhat sinister secrets and backstories to their lives. He investigates the building, he goes up to a sort of forbidden fourth floor, and he starts to uncover all sorts of connections to his own past and the fact that he's a foster child. I think that's a rich location, an old people's home. In fact, years ago, I wanted to create a story around an idea that aliens come to Earth and they occupy the bodies, bizarrely, of a residence, of an old people's residence home, mistakenly, and they're sort of unable to do much because they're basically old people. Now, the next two stories are quite political in their implications. The first one is Emma Watson, obviously Hermione from Harry Potter. She's come under the gamut and she's been under the spotlight this week in the last 10 days for her comments about supporting or being pro-Palestinian in a post that she posted. I'll pop up the image, where she sort of had the statement "solidarity" as a verb. What's happened is that Israel have officially described this as anti-Semitic. And I just wanted to sort of stress that to be critical of Israel is not to be anti-Semitic. And I think this is something that gets very complex. That's not to say that anti-Semitic people can be anti-Israeli. Absolutely. But to be anti-Israeli foreign policy, which essentially it is foreign policy in Palestine, to be anti that is not to be anti-Semitic. Many people who live in Israel, many Israelis, are very anti what the government is doing with the land grabs and the constriction, if you like, of the economy in the Gaza Strip and in Palestine. But her comment has led to a real kind of outcry from many Israeli government officials. And I just wanted to sort of reiterate that, what do you think, guys? I mean, surely we've got to be able to have an outspoken ability to criticize the actions of a state. And I think it's really dangerous to weaponize criticism as something that's absolutely unforgivable and reprehensible, such as anti-Semitism. Lots of actors and artists have come out in support. There's an organization called Artists for Palestine UK. Jim Jarmusch, the director, Asif Kapadia, the director of Amy Winehouse documentary, Ken Loach, the composer Brian Eno, Steve Coogan, Charles Dance, Gail Garcia Bernal, Maxine Peake. Countless actors have come out in support of Emma Watson. Curiously, I wonder whether, regardless of what we think of J.K. Rowling's trans debate, regardless of that, I wonder if Emma Watson is getting a sense of what it's like to be under the gamut and sort of ostracised and marginalised over something that you could argue is a sort of well-meaning statement or a thought-provoking statement, but not necessarily one which is soaked and coated in hate. On a similar subject, this story really confuses me. I was talking to Nadia, or really troubles me. I was talking to Nadia about this just before recording this. This is the story of Helen Mirren, who's playing Golda Meir, who was the she was the Prime Minister of Israel, and she was the Prime Minister during the Yom Kippur War in 1973. She's playing this Prime Minister, and there are accusations being levelled at her levelled at the production, that this is a case of something called Jewface, which is a little bit like blackface and yellowface, is what they're calling it, where with blackface, a white actor plays essentially a black character. Yellowface, a black actor plays a oriental character. And so there's this phrase being used called Jewface. Now, some of the things that I think should mitigate this, or should push back on this idea, is that Golda itself is being directed by a director, Guy Nativ, who himself is Israeli. So he cast Helen Mirren without there sort of being a thought about whether she needed to be Jewish. Does an actor or actress need to be Jewish in order to play a Jewish character? Or is this equivalent to blackfacing? An actress, Maureen Lipman, who's a sort of almost a national treasure in the UK for any of our foreign viewers, she said that this was a mistake casting Helen Mirren. She said, and I quote, "Because the Jewishness of the character of Golda is integral. I'm sure she'll be marvellous, but it would never be allowed for Ben Kingsley to play Nelson Mandela. You just wouldn't couldn't even go there. Well, interestingly, I don't know if she's forgotten, but Ben Kingsley played Gandhi. They're using a new phrase which is called Jew face. And so do you think this is a valid criticism? Is this, is there an equivalence when it comes to Jewish characters and whether it should only be Jewish actors playing Jewish characters? Isn't this a bit of a slippery slope? Does that mean, in a sense, that Jewish actors can't play anything other than Jewish characters? If it doesn't mean that, then surely it must mean that non-Jewish actors can play Jewish characters. Otherwise, in a way, you're kind of denying the art or the artistry of being an actor, right? Maybe in this situation, it's more about the fact, as Maureen Lipman says, the Jewishness of the character is so integral, and maybe it's fired up sort of passions and a strong emotional response because Golda is seen as such a pivotal character or important character in Israeli history. But I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that. It's quite a complex story. Netflix are looking to reunite Dwayne Johnson, Gal Gadot and Ryan Reynolds. They're going to be making 2 more Red Notices. I have to confess, I haven't watched it. Would you recommend it? What do you think? I like the trailers. I'm not a big fan of heist movies, if I'm honest. I've started watching Money Heist on Netflix. It's all right. I suppose I don't really care about whether they get the money or get the art or whatever it is that they're trying to nick. I wasn't a fan of Ocean's 8, Ocean's 11 and all that nonsense. I recognise they're quite good films, but Red Notice was the most expensive film that Netflix committed to. It cost something like $200 million. But they're going to make the next 2 films back to back. And God only knows what kind of money they're going to pay for it. They're probably going to pay somewhere in the region, I'd have thought, of $500 million. But yeah, so we're going to be seeing Dwayne Johnson, Gal Gadot and Ryan Reynolds returning in this sort of art heist world. This project is a remarkable one. Who remembers Beanie Babies? Beanie Babies was such an important thing in my parenting life because at some point, I think all of my daughters, apart from probably Kiki, the youngest, because they weren't relevant then, they all had an obsession with Beanie Babies. Well, a film is being made about the backstory or the people in the boardroom that were behind the whole Beanie Baby phenomenon. The project is called The Beanie Bubble. It stars Zach Galifianakis. You remember him from the Hangover series of films. Fabulously funny actor. Elizabeth Banks. Sarah Snook from Succession is in there too. And there was a documentary recently called Beanie Mania. I think they were sort of playing on Beatlemania. But now they're turning it into a film. And it's based on the book. And the title of the book is fascinating. The Great Beanie Baby Bubble. Mass Delusion and the Dark Side of Cute. And let's face it, I mean, fights would break out for the rarest types of Beanie Babies, and they were selling for ludicrous amounts of money. And of course, the other big story of the week was the Golden Globes this week, and I'm a little bit annoyed because Nanny Di, my mother, has been banging on about The Power of the Dog, the Jane Campion film starring Benedict Cumberbatch. And it did so well. It won Best Picture and Best Director. I mean, I can't call myself a film fan and not go and see it, can I? It also had, it won Best Supporting Actor, which my mum was very pleased about, for Cody Smith-McPhee. But Benedict Cumberbatch was pipped by Will Smith for his portrayal of the father of the Williams sisters, tennis players, in King Richard. And Best Actress went to Nicole Kidman for being the Ricardos, which I think is totally well deserved. And I have to confess that her performance in that film has dragged her back from really the abyss for me. I was beginning to find myself just getting a bit tired of her performances and finding them all a bit similar and full of affectation and all this kind of stuff. But she is absolutely sensational in being the Ricardos, a real return to form. So I think she deserved that Best Actress there. Best Musical Comedy went to West Side Story. I'm going to be very unpopular here, but it wasn't that we didn't like West Side Story. I just didn't see the point of remaking it. I really didn't. I don't know, the sort of issues at work within it seemed a bit out of date and things have just so moved on. I think maybe if you'd have repositioned it in a modern environment, a modern time, with all the complexities that are going on now, that might have been a bit more intriguing for us. But Rachel Zegler, she won Best Actress in a musical or comedy. Andrew Garfield won Best Actor for Tick, Tick, Boom, which, again, we haven't seen, and I know a number of you guys have been urging us to go and check it out. Belfast, the Kenneth Branagh movie, which we're very excited about seeing, won Best Screenplay. Drive My Car won Best Foreign Picture, non-English language. Hans Zimmer won for soundtrack for Dune, which is no surprise. He must have so many awards on his mantelpiece that his mantelpiece probably has fallen over. Billie Eilish finally won Best Original Song for No Time to Die. And so we come to films of the week, and the big release this week is the 5th film in the Scream franchise. This was an incredibly innovative, shocking and clever slasher reversioning of the slasher genre when the first film came out. I'm hearing it's an 18 certificate. I'm hearing that this isn't as bad as people were fearing it could be. So I'm definitely going to go and see this, and I'm probably going to review it too. It's a group. It's another group of teenagers being terrorized by Ghostface or another Ghostface. I mean, it's a little bit like the Halloween films. You know, slasher films. Well, the clue is in the genre title, slasher. Usually it involves a knife. I can only be scared so much by someone wielding a knife, so it's all going to be about jump scares. But if you fancy a horror film, you want to hold someone's hand, look after them and all that kind of stuff, Scream is out this week. This isn't necessarily released this week, but I think it's on streaming as from today, actually. The Tragedy of Macbeth is Joel Coen's version. He's one half of the Coen brothers. Version of the Shakespeare classic Macbeth. We've reacted to some of the teasers that there've been. It looks beautifully shot. If you fancy, it's not too long, if you fancy a sort of meditative, arresting, incredibly artistic portrayal of some Shakespeare, this is your cup of tea. It stars Frances McDormand and it stars Denzel Washington. I'm going to indulge myself watching that with a nice cup of cocoa, which is ludicrous because I don't drink cocoa. I'm going to be drinking coffee after coffee after coffee. Oddball film of the week has to be Memoria, which is a new film starring Tilda Swinton. Swinton plays a woman called Jessica, an expatriate from Scotland. She's in Bogota, and she's visiting her sister and her sister's husband because her sister's ill in hospital with a strange throat or respiratory problem. But one night, Tilda Swinton, is awoken by a strange bang or sonic boom. What's going on? Has someone farted? Has an asteroid struck? Have they been unsuccessful in Don't Look Up? So those are your 3 films of the week. That is your rushed rush through the weekly rushes. I'm now going to drink my Barocca because that's what I do when I want to relax. I drink Barocca, guys. Anyway, share your thoughts on any of the stories that we've talked about. Tell us what you think. Comment on any of the stories you've listened to today. We'd love your opinion. We love reading your comments. Take care.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.